Tammuz was a Mesopotamian deity that a lot of naysayers of the Bible claim is one of the inspirations for Jesus Christ. Issue with that is a mythological figure and a historical figure are two fundamentally different things. And I've already addressed this subject in another video, that Satan is a great imitator. And if you want to look at all these fables and tales that foreshadow Christ, that just reinforces the fact that he knew the gospel plan and what God's plan was for man's redemption. Anyway, but in Ezekiel chapter 8, you see a reference to Tammuz in Scripture, and God is showing Ezekiel all these different abominations that the people are doing. And in verse number 14, the Scripture says that he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Now, I can't really get into who Tammuz was and why they would be weeping for them, but it was kind of a cultural thing that, there were a couple of times a year, depending on which variation you look at of the story, that people would weep for Tammuz for one reason or for another. And the moral of the story here is that we ought to be really careful not to allow pagan or worldly influences to integrate our religious service. That's what he talks about in Jude, which I've already referenced, I think, this week, about there are certain men crept in unawares. And, we need to be careful because our adversary is very subtle. We need to carefully consider the origins, especially of holiday practices and things like that, because it's very easy to take something that should be, a simple enough concept, a religious concept, thinking specifically about Christmas this time of the year. And it's easy to allow the worldly influences and pagan influences to come in. People want to debate and argue over this. I'm not debating or arguing. I will just simply say that if you look at the origin of some of the things that, we have come to naturally accept, they're less than favorable in a religious sense. So we need to remember, of course, that subtlety is one of the chief tools of our adversary, and we're commanded in Matthew 10, verse 16, to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But anyway, that's kind of the thought for today. Be careful not to let the world infiltrate your religious worship.